Good, welcome.
All right. So for the record, I'm Jake Claro. I'm the Farm to Plate Director at the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund and a resident of Berry City. So we are, very thankful always to have the opportunity to present to you. Just to remind ourselves of why we actually are here. So we are here to present our annual report of work completed in accordance with the Farm to Plate Investment Program, which was enacted in 2009, and then that was reauthorized in 2019. And so the enabling legislation authorized the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund with creating Vermont's 10-year food system strategic plan and administering the Farm to Plate network in order to achieve the intended outcomes of increasing sustainable economic development and create jobs in Vermont's food and farm sector, to improve soils, water, and resiliency of the working landscape in the face of climate change, and improving access to healthy local foods for all Vermonters. So I will be referencing throughout this the document, and really want to start by saying that the thematic current that runs through this report is transformational change. So we all know that over the past few years, farmers, farm workers, food businesses, owners and employees, communities, NGOs, and state agencies have showed incredible resolve and resilience through the pandemic, and obviously what has been probably an unprecedentedly difficult year for our farmers due to flooding, frost, and other challenges. So while we've all shown resolve and resilience can be exhausted. And if we don't move beyond the mindsets and systems that have given rise to these challenges, that have given rise to the challenges in our ag sector and food system, we will exhaust our resources. And this is why more people across Vermont, not only those working in food and agriculture, are calling for transformative change to how we think about, plan, and design for, and act to address the interconnected challenges of our time. So this afternoon, we're going to highlight projects and initiatives happening in the Farm to Plate network that reveal how the ground is being laid for transformation in different parts of the food system. And so the efforts we're highlighting today touch upon the economic, the environmental, and food access outcomes of the Farm to Plate Investment Program, and include presentations on CSAs in healthcare, agroforestry, and local food retail supply chain development. Okay, so before our presenters online get into those particular topics, wanted to take a look at data and indicators that we track related to the legislative outcomes and part of tracking whether or not we're reaching our strategic goals of the 2021-2030 strategic plan. So if you open up your document and go to pages, starting on page 4, the by the numbers section. So we broke this out again. This is covering various indicators that cover economic development, climate resilience, and food access. So starting with economic development, just want to highlight a couple of key elements of how to interpret what's being shown here. So as of 2022, which is the last full year of employment data that we have, there are 61,506 people employed in the food system. So this is spanning from anywhere from production to manufacturing, distribution and storage, retail, hired labor, and even community food service and regulatory jobs. So that's 20.4% of total employment in Vermont is people that have some employment in association with food and agriculture. So certainly it's an incredibly important sector to Vermont's economy at large. And from 2021 to 2022, we saw an increase of 1,700 jobs in the food system. That's about a 3% increase. And that, though it's still below pre-pandemic employment, and that is still below pre-pandemic employment levels by about 3,600 jobs. And most of that is due to losses in retail and food service. So those net job losses are about 2/3 of the decline that we've seen since the pandemic. However, food manufacturing employment has remained strong even through the pandemic, and that's about 12% of total food system employment. So we have a really robust and resilient food manufacturing sector, which is encouraging. And farm operators, so farmers and hired farm workers make up about 34% of this total. And I just want to note that we're likely to see what could be some significant changes in that number and percentage. So that those are numbers based on the 2017 Census of Agriculture. The 2022 Census of Agriculture data should be available hopefully within the next year. And so that will provide us with new estimates on the number of farms and hired farm workers. So I just want to note that we are in some cases, this data we are dealing with older sources, that we don't get annual reports on.
Question, and then I'll turn to Representative. Restaurants, are they categorized into retail?
Yes, yeah. So that's total retail is a shorthand, which would include restaurant, food service, and various, retail.
And retail stores as well,
Yeah.
that sell food. The community food service category, it's hard to see on the chart.
Yeah, and I should note too that these graphics are available in a more interactive form on our website, and the community food service, regulatory, and actually fishing, there's some sole proprietors that classify themselves as fishing operations. It's a very small slice. We started collecting data on those three categories in 2021. And community food service would actually be, people that are working to provide, charitable food to communities in different capacities in that way. It's like 100 and something people that are employed in that area.
Yeah, Representative Wright.
I was just going to clarify that those three new categories are all in that in line.
Yeah. Yep. Kind of. And also, if we, with more space, we could have sort of zoomed in a little more to see that more clearly. Just another quick note on the establishments. Really what we've seen is a stable number of establishments even through the pandemic. So I think that speaks to, not a lot of places closed operations, but, rather lost employees. So there has been relatively more stability in the number of food establishments than there has been in employment. And then looking at the food system employment multiplier graphic. So really the main takeaway of that is that employment in the food system is not limited to impacting just employees in the food system, but has greater impacts in other sectors of Vermont's economy. So that comes through wages that food system employees spend in the economy. That also includes business to business expenditures with other sectors for equipment, parts, and services. So for every job that we add in our food system, we also add another 0.8 jobs in the Vermont economy. And so the multiplier is therefore 1.8. And so you can think of the total employment impact of our food system as going from 61,506 to 110,711 employees that we can show a relationship with the food system.
I'll just interrupt again, Jake.
Yeah. I think that's works for me. So if people want to,
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
It definitely works for us. We hear multipliers fairly regularly in the committee, and I'm wondering, how do we know that it's 1.8 in this case and not 2 or 1.5, other number?
I was going to say, this is a question that
Ellie Taylor, Vermont Stable Johnson, because Nick Rockford, who's with Tom Quebec's partner at Rockford Associates, we, through the New England Feeding New England project, had him gain access to the in-plan model, which is an econometrics model. It's not quite as robust as REMI, which is what your revenue projections are done for the legislature, but it's pretty close. And he ran those numbers for all 6 New England states so we could answer this question. And these were the Vermont numbers that came out of that modeling process. So it's official.
Good, thank you.
Yeah. Official with assumptions, I guess, is the
Right.
And you do see significant differences between the New England states in that multiplier number?
Yeah, some of them I'm not remembering off the top of my head. It's in volume 3. You could go look there. But I think there's some states that are like 1.3, 1.5. I mean, but you know, for Maine and for Vermont, given how predominantly ag we are, it's gonna be higher.
Yeah, and you can actually in that volume for Vermont, it breaks out also by, you can see the multiplier for different manufacturing industries for different farming sectors. So it gets very granular. So that is you know an aggregate average, that 1.8. Great. So in terms of climate resilience, you know, we felt like this was a good year to emphasize and show some data around long-term annual precipitation and also what's called days of heavy precipitation. And as much as you know, the flooding this year certainly took us by surprise in a lot of ways. If you look at this data, you know, going back to 1970, this trend has been evident that starting in the 70s, we have seen more days of heavy precipitation and more annual precipitation than any other prior decade, going back from 1900 to up till 1969. So this is really the trend. And I think, you know, as we look at this trend line and we consider the increasing impacts of you know, greenhouse gas emissions and climate change, that it's reasonable to expect that this trend will increase in time. And so we really, you know, I think have to think about preparedness and adaptation as a major component of policy when we're talking about climate change in Vermont, and really trying to draw these connections with, you know, what do we need to do to make our ag and food sector adaptive and prepared for these weather events. And turning the page over to page 6 is also thinking about, as much as, you know, extreme rain is very much on our minds, that this is not the only climate risk we face. So every county in Vermont is facing either medium or high risk to extreme rain, hurricanes, or water stress, which in simpler terms is drought. And I, you know, I think maybe we remember or not, but before the flooding of July, a lot of farms were concerned about drought, and there were drought conditions. And so, you know, we are definitely dealing with growing seasons that involve these risks at different times of the year. And with drought, you know, definitely irrigation becomes a priority, and farms, you know, investing in or having assistance to invest in irrigation infrastructure. So that's you know, really some of the highlights of you know, some of the indicators around climate resilience and climate change, and how we were thinking about that related to the food system. For food access, since 2018, we've been actually tracking data around where Vermonters purchase local food. So that's that first line graph of this section. And I think the big thing to take away from this is that local food is available in essentially all types of markets in Vermont. So a high percentage of Vermonters are able, you know, and are purchasing local food across, you know, farm stands and direct sales, restaurants, grocery stores, and also convenience stores and corner markets. So if you look at that line, starting in 2018, that was 41.9%, and that has now increased to 86.9%. So a huge jump in terms of people that are accessing local food in convenience stores and corner markets. The other thing that I'd like to call out here, and what, you know, what's behind this is for interpretation and more, I think, analysis. But the farm CSA, farm stand, farmers market purchasing percentage has gone down since we started collecting data. This could be a number of factors could be behind this. How farms themselves are approaching direct sales, you know, maybe less participation or reliance on farmers markets. This could be a sign of, you know, the availability of local foods in grocery stores and convenience and corner markets being more available, that there's less need to perhaps look to find food in those direct markets, and also farms themselves to adapting how they approach direct sales. So more self-distribution and actual like home delivery. And so, yeah, there could be just a number of factors that are contributing to that, that we're, you know, in conversation with partners about and trying to understand.
Representative Rice has a question.
Is this the statutorily defined local?
Yes, yes, and it's yeah, it's a good question because that has changed.
So we are now talking about foods grown in Vermont.
Yeah,
But in
yep.
2018, were we talking about that, or was that the previous?
I don't know if that in this question, which is asked to the Vermonter poll, if that definition was provided. So you're now raising for me a flag of like, right, how is that defined or interpreted by respondents? What I do know is that we did actually, through another Vermonter poll question, the majority of Vermonters understand the term local to mean within Vermont. So that would be, the interpretation that most Vermonters are applying anyway to the question.
But as they're asked this question, they might be using whatever they're.
Yes. Yep. So there is a element of interpretation that could be happening.
And sorry, just.
Yeah, no, good. It's good.
The general stores, are they captured in the convenience store corner market?
Yeah. So we talked a little about this with the Senate, that's another area where some might interpret that as a corner. They might be thinking general stores, corner market, or they could be thinking of that as a grocery market or grocery store. Yeah. Because we don't get too into the details of how these terms are being defined. In part because also through the Vermont poll, just trying to like keep it simple and yeah.
Yeah, I would think that maybe I would think that people in different communities in Vermont would define.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of communities might not have what you would define as a corner store.
Yeah.
It's not a corner.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Representative Templeman and then Representative Levitt.
So I've got questions about the details of this graph, and I'm wondering if this is the right setting for that. Like for example, we see a huge decline here in farm CSA and farm stand numbers going from 93.5% in 2018 down to just below 80% this past year. So can I ask how, like what attributed to that?
Yeah. So I think my interpretation of this, and certainly there's a margin of error. But I think if you look at the 2020 and then the 2021 number, from what we understand about how farms adapted during COVID, and may not and also the periodic closures of farmers markets, that there were a lot of pivots happening online sales. Retailers were potentially more interested in acquiring local products because of problems with the supply chain. So that's where the 2020 to 2021 drop makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But the persistence of that is the part that I'm not sure.
That's what I'm kind of curious about, because it still falls off after that. I mean, it goes up a little bit, but back down again.
Yeah.
Between 2022 and 2023.
And again, that could be that some of those pivots really in a way stuck. And so, farms may have, found reliable sales to a corner market, local grocery store that then became like, well, that's, we're going to keep doing that. And we're going to limit now our other direct sale methods.
So it may not all be packed.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Yeah, that's why I don't necessarily interpret that as bad. I think it's a sign of just shifting, market conditions and adaptations that farms have made, and primarily, accelerated by what was happening during the pandemic.
Okay.
Representative Levitt.
I think I'm realizing my question doesn't apply, because I think I think it's going to come up later in terms of folks who don't even have access to buying local food. And what I'm not seeing in this is like a Dollar General, which is the only supermarket that they have access to in Alberg. But I haven't set foot in there yet, so I don't know if they sell local. I don't think they do.
Yeah.
But I think that comes up later. So.
Yeah. And that could very well too be whether Dollar General gets interpreted as a convenience store is definitely a question. So the line graph below this is looking at sort of the ways in which Vermonters are acquiring local food in non-monetary transactional ways. So this is looking at, how are Vermonters getting local food through hunting, fishing, foraging, bartering, and also, and there's a lot of variability in this, and long-term trends is still kind of trying to work out what what to take away from this data. But the piece that is very clear for sure is that a greater percentage of Vermonters have received local food from a charitable organization, and I think that both, as we heard in the roadmap testimony last week, certainly speaks to the need, and also a lot of the precarious nature that a lot of Vermonters find themselves in economically and with accessing food in general. And also it speaks to that more charitable programs are utilizing local food. So there's sort of two elements, I think, two dynamics operating in that percent increase. But yeah, I think it does speak to the vulnerability of what a lot of Vermonters are facing.
Representative Rice?
Yeah, I actually just had one last question on the first chart, which is just that the biggest change is actually in that convenience store. But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
more than double.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you have any insight there about.
And again, maybe that some of this could be change of interpretation, or since we've started asking this question, more people just a general awareness of, or having more awareness of what they're buying local. And then it could also be, that there are more local products getting distributed to and available in those marketplaces. And then, how much of the pandemic had there's something happening there as well that has led to that increase.
And then in the bottom chart, it looks like we didn't ask if they were growing food until 2020.
Yeah.
But somewhere else is.
Yeah, that is correct. So, the list grew a little bit in 2020, and I think, we sort of based on the resource we had to pose the question, I think we had a more consolidated list of options, and that we were able to expand that a little bit more starting in 2020.
Representative Pearl?
I'm just wondering if I'm interpreting this right in the bottom chart. Is it saying that in 2020, did 74% of people say they're growing some of their own food?
Correct.
Wow.
That seems
Yeah,
like
that could be home. That could be home gardening. Because I think these are consolidated. There's more of a description to the response in the actual survey. Yeah, so it's like it gives examples of home garden, growing your own vegetables.
Yeah.
So it could be in very limited ways.
Like apple tree in the backyard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I'm just wondering about, who, can you just go over again, and maybe you already touched on this, just like who exactly was polled?
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering
Yeah.
if there was more people responding that were passionate about food or local food, and that would skew a result.
Yeah. So the Vermonter poll, which is run out of UVM's Center for Rural Studies, it is a statistically representative sample. They do provide us with demographic information. So from what I've seen, the one maybe outlier where it doesn't match up perfectly with our demographics is it does tend to be a slightly more educated sample. But if you look at sort of political affiliations and in general socioeconomic categories, it's pretty representative, and it's a random sample. It is, I think for some years it was only done by phone. I think they've changed some of the methods, so that also could change who's responding. And yeah, I think it did maybe in some years it skews maybe a little older too. But it's
And
it's not
trying to say.
Yeah, no.
information's not right. I'm just thinking anecdotally about
Yeah,
if you ride around in the summertime
Sure.
and pick out houses with a garden out front.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
it seems like that number just was like, 3/4 of the population
Yeah.
is growing their own food. That seems
Yeah.
like it couldn't be, but
Yeah, but that,
Great if it is.
Yeah.
Just-
and that could be a pot of, a pot of basil in the window.
Yeah, yeah.
Where that person says, yeah.
Representative Wilson, did you have a question?
I was just wondering at the beginning, why the date 2030 was chosen?
Yeah, so the strategic plan covers a 10-year period. So we released it 2021, and the end date is 2030 of that. So that's the time frame that the plan was created around. And the first farm to plate strategic plan was 2010 to 2020. So the 20, right. So the enabling legislation defines it as like a 10-year plan, a 10-year time frame.
Is it coincidence that that aligns with the UN?
Um,
There's a lot of people who signed on to that, but it's not legislated.
I think it is, well, I guess maybe it is definitionally a coincidence in that we're both, yes, we're using 2030 just because that's the 10-year, that's the end date of the 10-year period from 2021 to 2030.
So this, this legislation, 2010 was when it was first.
Correct.
Like
Yeah.
first formed.
Correct. Yeah.
2009, actually. 2009,
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with what's the sustainability goals. I mean, it's a line, but it's not anything to do with innovations, it's development stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. This is all focused around food development for Vermont.
The whole plan perfectly aligns with the UN. If you look at their 2030 agenda, every bit of feeding the world, every bit of it. So anyway, I don't want
A nice coincidence.
Yeah. So lastly, just looking at the map on the right-hand side, what this is showing is a combination of, so it's census tracts, so it's areas in Vermont where populations are experiencing either they have low income and low access, low access or low income. And what that means, so low income from this standpoint would be an area where the poverty rate is 20% or higher, or the median family income is less than 80% of the median family income for the state or metro area. And then the low access would be a significant number or share of residents are more than 1 mile in urban situations or 10 miles in rural from the nearest food store. So that low income and low access speaks to both, the lack of maybe economic means, but also the lack of, the ability to physically access stores that are providing food. So those are especially vulnerable areas. Low access is, so more than 100 households have no access to a vehicle and are more than a half mile from a supermarket, or a significant number of residents are more than 20 miles from the nearest supermarket. And then low income is again that 20% poverty rate of 20% or higher, or median family income less than 80%. Looking at this map, you can certainly see that both rural and urban areas of Vermont experience a combination of these things, and that as we as it relates to the food security roadmap that was presented last week, is that food security is not only about just income, but there's other factors, and transportation being a major one, to the ability of people to feed themselves and have healthy food available to them. And certainly, I think looking at this too, is that the northeast portion of the state, in particular, has high concentrations.
Like Glastonbury, a little blue down in your corner.
No, that is not. It is part of Bennington, I believe.
Oh.
Yeah, but that's right. Yeah, part of Bennington. Yeah.
Representative Rice.
I just wanted to, so in the first paragraph here, it says food stores, but then below it's supermarkets. Are we just talking about access to
Yeah, the food. Yeah, so there is so this is from the USDA, and they so this would not include certain smaller grocery stores or convenience stores, and in part that's from their standpoint. from what they can get access to for like data purposes. So it's easier for them to consistently identify where larger supermarket or grocery store is. And yeah, and probably there are like, food cooperatives would be a part of that. But yeah, some smaller independents may not be a part of this analysis. So it could be in some ways missing, food that is close in proximity to people.
Well, I mean, for that matter, it's missing farm stands and those things.
Correct.
But it's,
Yeah.
but the intention is to track where someone could access sort of all of the food that they need.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Sort of a conventional, purchase.
Yeah, for this statistic on low income and access, 80% median family income for the state. Do you know what the median income for the state was in 2023 in Vermont?
I don't. It's in the range of, it's like either 45 or 55,000, I believe, somewhere in that range. But I could, I was gonna say,
It's higher.
someone who's on a phone right now could probably give 65.
I think so, that's what's sticking in my head, but.
And it also, it does vary a little
Is it
bit.
household income? That matters.
Medium family
Family.
income. Yeah, and that would vary because it is also tied to either the state or the metro area, so.
It says, well, median household income is 74,000,
Yeah, it seems high.
but family income is usually a little different, so. Definition.
We can look into that. Because also, might be able to see from USDA just what they're using as their source for that. Okay. So that, just trying to cover some of the data that we're tracking and looking at in relation to the legislative outcomes. And again, a lot of this is available on our website to interact with a little more. And we will continue to track progress on these and a number of other indicators. So moving on, I won't spend a lot of time on this next section on pages 8 and 9 because our VSJF's Executive Director, Ellen Kaler, presented to the committees on New England Feeding New England 2 weeks ago, I believe. But just to know that certainly other states in the region are definitely looking to us and learning, and that we are more and more trying to work as a region to think about how do we bring more resources to New England and in turn to Vermont. How do we act as more of an interest group, and part of that is seeing the relationship that we have as a producing state. Many other New England states are, kind of see them as consuming states, large metro areas of lots of consumers. So if we're working more in alignment together, there's opportunities to create markets for our farmers and food producers in those metro areas. And a lot of the food supply that is available in this region is coming from production that's based in Vermont. So really just trying to figure out how do we work together and potentially bring more resources to this region by doing so. So the next pages 10 and 11, we heard from my colleague Becca Warren on the food security roadmap to 2035. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this either because you heard quite a bit about it last week. Just a reminder that this is the product of over 600 Vermonters, led by the Farm to Plate Network's Food Security Priority Strategy team, and with that aim of ensuring that all Vermonters have the food that they need by 2035, and also a reminder too that this roadmap provides that depth and detail to how do we accomplish the third legislative outcome of the investment program to increase local healthy food for all Vermonters. So this gives us really the policy choices to do that, and is a complement to the strategic plan in that way. All right. So now we get to our online presenters. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Kelly Dolan to do introductions for our first two. And then I think we're going to take a break, and then I'll come back and intro our third presenter for the day. So thank you.
Thank you, Jay.
Yeah.
Hi, Kelly. Oh, hi, Kelly.
Yeah, there's two Kellys.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kelly Dolan. I'm the network manager for Vermont Farm to Plate. So first up, we have Emma Heilman, the pharmacy project director for the Vermont Farmers Food Center in Rutland. Emma serves as a co-curator for the Farm to Plate Healthcare and CSA Community of Practice. This team gathers on a bi-monthly basis, bringing together professionals and practitioners to better connect the food and healthcare systems. Emma will be describing how this team uses food as medicine programs to improve medical outcomes and enhance food security for individuals while providing a reliable income stream for Vermont farmers. So I will hand it off to Emma.
Thank you, Kelly. As Kelly mentioned, I help co-facilitate the CSA and Healthcare Community of Practice. I just want to start by kind of explaining our model and why it's an important one for Vermont and unique, really, to Vermont. In general, produce prescription programs, food as medicine, it's a popular topic right now. There are national grants, there's a lot of national work being done, and a lot of those are focused more on urban areas and partnering with grocery stores. So there are a lot of voucher programs that exist out there. But here in Vermont, we have 5 programs running currently that focus on the CSA and healthcare model. And we think this is a really unique model and an important one for local agriculture here in the state. For one, the CSA model allows patients that are signed up through this for this program to try new vegetables, to actually learn what is grown in their own state. They get to know their farmers. We always list on our newsletter here which farm is supplying what vegetables every week. And the money that we have to spend on this food is spent hyper locally for all of these programs. And also community is built. The people pick up their share, they're interacting with other people, they're not just going to the grocery store getting their vegetables from California or wherever they're getting their vegetables from. So we think this is just a really wonderful way to bring healthcare into local ag and local economy here in Vermont. And I just sort of want to bring it back to our data. Right now we are aggregating our 2023 data. So hopefully in the next 2 or 3 weeks, we'll be able to put that out there so people can see what impact these 5 programs had this past year. But in the Farm to Plate report that you currently have, we have the aggregated data from 2022. And just through these 5 programs alone, we had 26 farms participate all across the state and over $119,000 worth of produce purchased from these local. 46 participating healthcare clinics also, and close to 2,000 people reached through those programs that year. And I just want to also highlight 2 of these 5 programs that are either going into their decade or have been running for a decade. And we have some data to report on those years, those aggregated years. So one is here in Rutland. I help to run the pharmacy project here at the Vermont Farmers Food Center. And we are celebrating our 10th year this year, which is really a great thing to celebrate here in the county. And since we began, we have put over $325,000 back into our local farms, specifically Rutland County farms. And also part of our model here is to focus on finding new and emerging farmers in the area to provide sort of an incubator market to get them going. And just in the last 2 years, we did work with 2 new farms, both of which the owners of those farms are under the age of 40. They are the new generation, the next generation. And one was a Green Mountain College grad when Green Mountain College was still here in Poultney. So we're really supporting those next generation of farmers and seeking those out every year. And then the other program I wanted to highlight which is the oldest one in the state, is the Vermont Youth Conservation Corps. And they have a slightly different model because they do farm the land themselves and provide all of that produce. And since they started in 2012, it's estimated that they've put 712,000 pounds of produce into the hands of the patients that have been signed up for their particular program. And then also, I just want to highlight the clinics that have really been there for both of these programs since the beginning. The University of Vermont Medical Center in Central Vermont and Rutland Regional Medical Center community health teams, as well as our community health centers, federally qualified health clinics here in Rutland. And we think that housing these programs in food hubs really offers a way to, sorry, the train is going to pass by. I'm in Rutland, downtown Rutland. But we really think that the food hubs have the relationships with the farms, and we've seen other programs start in clinics that have kind of petered out, whether through turnover or just not really being able to get them up and running. But we really feel like the food hubs here in the state have those relationships and have the ability to really aggregate a great CSA for patients. I also just want to focus a little bit on our members, what those members look like, who they are. In 2022, our data did show that 75% of the participants were considered food insecure, and that the average household income was only between $10,000 and $26,000, which is significantly low. So a lot of these folks are already having trouble feeding themselves, let alone feeding themselves with local food and local healthy food. So our programs really have an impact for those folks. And sorry, I forgot to share my screen here, just a few pictures for you, kind of bring it. Everybody see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So those are a few pictures from Acorns Pharmacy, Rutland's Pharmacy. We host community potlucks with Rutland's Pharmacy and BYCC. And then I also just wanted to tell one story to bring it down even smaller. So this is Eileen Henry and myself here at our location in Rutland. And I just wanted to highlight Eileen's story because I think it's a really great one of who is benefiting from these programs. Eileen was born and raised in Rutland. She lived her entire life in Rutland. She was the class of 1976 from Rutland High School, and she worked at several local banks and grocery stores here until she retired. She became a pharmacy participant with our program in 2020. She was signed up through Rutland Regional Medical Center, her doctor, to basically help manage her COPD and diabetes. And right from the get-go, Eileen was so stoked. She started to lose weight. That first year, she felt great. She would email us. She would show up with a smile on her face and just was really, really engaged with the program. And then she was in the program for the 2 years following that, 2021 and 2022. And she served on our advisory board for planning for pharmacy. She was interviewed by Vermont Digger for an article, and then also spent her time to participate in a co-design research project we were doing here, basically asking the question, what do our members do after pharmacy ends in the early fall? Because it is a seasonal program. And this past April, Eileen did pass away. So this is kind of in honor of her. And she was such a big advocate for those last few years of her life and for our program. And I think it's just a great example of quality of life. She had, she was able to lose some weight. She was more active. She just felt better in general. She was cooking her own food for those last few years of her life and really got to learn new vegetables. And she found a newfound love of sauerkraut in her last few years and was just so excited to talk to us about sauerkraut when we partnered with a farm down in southern Vermont to provide sauerkraut bags for one of the weeks. So yeah, Eileen was a great program participant, and I wanted to tell her story here. And I just want to end with, I guess, some challenges too of our programs, but why we want to like keep going for it and keep having this emphasis on local. So one challenge we have is the seasonality of produce here in the Northeast. Several of our programs are trying to pilot different fall and winter shares and maybe get some dairy and meat options as well into that, you know, when the bulk of our produce stops in early to mid-October. And then also transportation, like Jake mentioned, just having people access our programs. Every program does it differently. We have a huge hub and spoke model here in Rutland where we drive to the clinics, we deposit the shares, the volunteers are picking up from the clinics, then driving to homebound folks in their area, their neck of the woods. So it really is a big community effort to pull off all of these programs every year. And every community is really different too, and we really value that not all of 5 of these programs have the exact same model, but they use what resources they have in the areas that they have them. And we feel that's just super important to really focus on the local community and what is needed. And so you can see from this map from 2022 that you know, there are areas of the state where there isn't a current food as medicine program. There was one running in Bennington, and then that kind of once COVID hit, that was a little disrupted. But there's a lot of potential to get one up and running there again, particularly in that southern Vermont section. You know, we have a lot of advocates. We have people reaching out to us who want to be a part of a program. We know our food hubs in that area. We know the clinics. You know, we just need to find some more funding and really get those people together and try and make this a statewide model. I think that's where I'll leave it. I'll just open it up for questions.
Representative Templeman.
I'm wondering about, hi, how are you? I'm wondering about your protein aspect of this, specifically animal and dairy. Have you made a differentiation between grass-fed products and grain-fed products?
Yeah, I mean, we've offered dried beans actually as a protein before here from one of our farms. And we do work with a nonprofit farm that has grass-fed beef. But really like the focus on local, you know, I actually don't know of local farms here in Rutland that aren't using grass-fed beef, but I'm very, very local focused. Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why, you know, the grocery store voucher model has its drawbacks, because people can access food that might be considered healthy, but might not be as healthy for the environment or as healthy for their bodies. And yeah, so I hope that answered that question.
Just maybe a little nuance. Just specifically what I was thinking about was the differences between the fat qualities of those two products. Whereas with 100% grass-fed, you have higher levels of omega-3 fats.
Mm-hmm.
With the grain-fed animal, those usually turn to omega-6s. And I just was thinking about that in relation to measuring health outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, that's it would be a data point to see. I know that most of our programs are not focused on adding protein right now. It's an idea. I think we have gone with dairy and eggs before venturing into meat. And we've only offered it here in Rutland when we haven't had to pay for it, you know,
Right.
because it's coming from a nonprofit farm. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Emma, thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'll stop sharing here.
Great. So next we have two network members that will be sharing on their collaborative work as part of the agroforestry priority strategy team. So first up, Mark Krosick is the owner and operator of Valley Clay Plain Forest Farm in New Haven. He has been involved in an agroforestry storytelling educational project and also hosted an educational farm and forest visit for fellow team members. Mark has over 15 years of experience as an author, teacher, and consultant working throughout the Northeast on agroforestry and ecological planning. So I will hand it off to Mark.
Hello, folks. Can you all see me all right?
You can, yes, thank you.
All
Welcome.
right, I can see myself actually there. All right. Well, would it make sense for Juan to go first, or should I just go? Do you think is that better? You already introduced me, so I'll go.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike.
Well, nice to see you all. Thank you for your time and the introduction. So I am sharing with you all just some of my experiences, both as a grower as well as an educator and consultant. I'm going to assume, and Juan has a number of slides that are going to help add a lot of visuals to the words I'm going to share here. I'm assuming not everyone's familiar with the term agroforestry, so I'm going to start there. And there may be a little redundancy between our respective talks here, but one common definition is that agroforestry is the intentional integration of trees and shrubs with other forms of agriculture, be it cropland or grazing animals. And we happen to live in one part of the world where we still see very well-established markets for an agroforestry product, that being maple syrup, which we would consider a form of forest farming. The idea of farming within a forested context. We're really kind of capitalizing on this incredible resource we have in the maple trees throughout our region. And so tying into some of what Jake spoke about earlier on, when we start to think about how agroforestry fits in our landscapes today in our region, it provides a lot of diversity and resilience just in terms of thinking about how we can capture as much solar energy as possible when we think about things like carbon sequestration. Trees and shrubs are fantastic tools to help absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and store them within their bodies. In terms of agricultural resilience, we're talking about potentially diversifying the products that different farms grow, be it fruits or nuts or timber or fuel wood. It also has a lot of benefits from an animal health and welfare point of view, just providing shade for livestock, protection from winds and winter storms, as well as just the wind protection benefits to cropland. On top of that, also just having more diversity in the landscape is going to tend to invite more, improved pollination, also provide more diversity from the insect point of view, helping potentially mitigate pest and disease issues. And then there's all sorts of conservation benefits that tie into this. The idea of riparian buffers is one agroforestry practice that's widely recognized. Just the idea of maintaining tree and shrub cover along our waterways, helping prevent erosion and minimize nutrients making their way into our waterways, shading the water for improved aquatic health, et cetera. So there's lots of reasons why agroforestry is really beneficial, both economic and ecological. And we're at this interesting inflection point in the history of agroforestry. It's something that people have done. It's really the way folks farmed for centuries, if not thousands of years. And now it's only once we've disassociated farming and forestry from one another that the idea of integrating those practices is something that becomes a bit more novel. And the practices themselves, in some ways, they'd say the term agroforestry originated in the late 70s. And I would say it's really only in about the last decade that we've seen a lot of traction being gained with just interest in these practices. And there's a hotbed of activity in the Midwest. New England and the Northeast in general, as well as the Southeast, have also seen quite a bit of interest. But whereas a lot of the practices are much better established in warmer climates, there's still a lot to learn and a lot of room for improvement here in our region. I've been thrilled to be able to be a part of what Farm to Plate has been manifesting over the last couple of seasons. Just really recognizing that in a lot of ways, agroforestry is going to be the future of farming in our region, I believe. The strategy team visit that they did here, as well as they've done at several other sites, have been really potent ways to engage growers who are already active with this, and also just explore the brain trust that is so rich in our region already of talented practitioners. And then just also sharing, what's been working and what challenges we've faced. And then I think that the storytelling project was a really potent way to help transcend beyond just like the specific practices themselves and talk about how growers are leveraging agroforestry to help make their farms more robust, resilient, and work for them in their communities. In a lot of ways, I see agroforestry as the frontiers of farming in our region, and I've likened it to perhaps where the organic farming movement probably was about 30 years ago. I think we're going to see much more rapid adoption of a lot of these practices, but it, in a lot of ways, is the future of farming, which is ironic in that it's also the ancient past of farming. But we've got a great team of people in our region that are really helping move this process forward. And Juan's going to get into some of that during his presentation next. But I appreciate your time. I appreciate your interest. And it's really exciting to be able to participate with Farm to Plate on the great work they're doing.
Great, thanks, Mark. Before we go to Juan, does anybody have any questions?
Great. Thanks so much, Mark. So next up, we have Juan Alves, a research associate with UVM Extension. Juan has a doctorate in natural resources from the University of Vermont and has been involved in extensive research on grazing management, agroecology, ecosystems, goods and services, conservation policy, green markets, and ecological economics. He was a significant contributor to a recent agroforestry species project, lending his expertise both in the development and research phases in collaboration with fellow team members. So I will hand it off to Juan.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kelly. I'm going to put some pictures and a little more context to what Mark just greatly described about agroforestry. So my presentation today is about the management of trees, crops, and livestock, which constitutes agroforestry. So oops. All right. So what is agroforestry? Just as Mark mentioned, is the intentional integration and management of trees, shrubs, crops, and animal farming systems to create environmental, economic, and social benefits. And this is the definition that is accepted by the USDA, give or take a few, change of words in paraphrasing. But I give it a little twist by saying that it's an agricultural practice of integrating and managing trees and shrubs into crop and animal farming systems to create environmental, economic, and social benefits. Okay, and I will let you know why did I change this later. So some common types of agroforestry systems accepted by the USDA, and all of them active in Vermont, are windbreaks, which are barriers to wind so that crops can grow properly. Because there is a study that shows that every time that wind surpasses certain speed, crops slow down the growth. So windbreaks are great for that, to slow down prevailing winds. Forest farming, it's farming medicinal plants or food plants into the forest, in the existing forest. Silvopasture is integrating animals to forages and to forests, and this could be existing forests, or better yet, trees added to open landscapes in a range ways. Then we have riparian buffers, which help filtrate water and sediments into waterways, increasing water quality, improving habitat for biodiversity, corridors for fauna. And then we have alley cropping, which is a design system that it consists of alleys between rows of trees where farmers can develop crops like hay, pasture, or annual crops and row crops. So speaking of silvopasture, it accounts for about 4.6% of Vermont's woodland acres grazed in the state. So some of the agroforestry production possible in Vermont consists of timber and non-timber forest products like maple, medicinal, mushrooms, nuts, fruits, and other products. So here is the caveat about why I say is an agricultural practice, because silvopasture is sometimes perceived by people as clearing the woods and adding cattle to it, but cows in the woods without management of the three components is not silvopasture. So you have to manage the three components: the trees, the forages, and the animals, in order to constitute a silvopasture system. So this picture is from USDA and depicts, and in my sense, it depicts how Vermont landscape could preserve its forests and at the same time expand tree farming throughout agroforestry, with different formats and arrangement of agroforestry. So recognizing the need of expanding innovative climate adaptation and mitigation approaches, the Agroforestry Priority Strategy Team took on 2 projects in 2022 and 2023. The first one was intended to expand existing knowledge about agroforestry as an important climate change mitigation and adaptation strategy. And the second one was focused on providing useful information to technical assistance providers, farmers, and distributors looking to put agroforestry into action. So some of the products elaborated in 2022 and 2023. So the priority strategy team helped to support collaboration among farmers, educators, and service providers through frequent meetings consisting of once every 2 week meetings, 1.5 hour each meeting, and where we have presentations and new folks and in a network of different private and public collaborators that we still encounter at every gathering. We partner with the storytelling project that Mark was mentioning. So that was born out of the agroforestry priority strategy team in partnership with UVM Food Systems grad student who completed about 5 interviews with Vermont farms to enhance awareness of agroforestry by sharing the stories of agroforestry farmers in the state and showcasing the many farmers that are practicing agroforestry through an interactive story map. We developed an agroforestry species list. So the species list was based on feedback from the agroforestry priority strategy team, who put forth a request for proposals and hired a consultant to create a quick reference list of commonly used species adaptable to Vermont climate. And then the next one, we also foster collaborative learning in Vermont. Again, the priority strategy team functions as a space for both action and co-learning, with participation from farmers, technical assistance providers, and researchers gathering different Vermont locations sometimes. So looking forward, and future expansion of agroforestry, I think it's important to continue to support education on agroforestry systems, as one of the questions asked by a survey revealed that most people don't know what agroforestry is, and it could be we could do a great job at informing not only service providers and researchers, but also the public about agroforestry. Another thing is increasing nursery capacity, because with the latest funding set forth by the federal government to support climate smart practices and solutions based on nature, there is a lot of funding going into agroforestry, but we detected that there is not enough nursery capacity to support the amount of trees that are going to be planted in the future. Another need, I think, is processing and storage facilities, viability analysis, and assess research needs, so that we can know what works and what doesn't work in Vermont and New England. So this is what I had to say today. If you have any questions, please.
Thank you. And we do have a question, at least from Representative Lipsky.
Yeah, my question, back a few slides, Juan, you had an area that was considered short rotation woody crops. And I was curious what in Vermont represented a short rotation woody crop.
Let me check my presentation again.
It was an overview. It had riparian buffers and.
I was in the overall what Vermont
It's a
would look
drawing.
like. Yeah.
It was the USDA slide, one that showed the various
The visual.
visual.
Let's see if I can find it.
I believe in most cases that would be something like bioenergy type crops, like willows or poplars that are grown for biomass converted to electricity or heat. Something like what would supply like the McNeil plant or the Middlebury College boiler system. There may be other things as well.
No, more. There you go. The one up on top there.
Short rotation woody crops.
Yes, I think Mark is right. And from the looks of it, it looks like this is an alley-croppy system, just like this one here in the left side of the slide. So yes, it could be willows, poplars. There is a need with the state advising on bedded pack, composting bedded pack systems. There is a great need for bedding, and these systems could provide some of the wood chips necessary for instance, composting bedded packs, but many other uses too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I had a question about, you said there was a lot of funding going into this, and the nursery need, but I was curious what the funding is that, like, who's driving, or where is the money coming from to support these projects?
Yes, the funding is coming primarily from USDA through their different channels, free proposals, or in partnership with agencies, and so the funding is national because the US is a signatory of the conventions, the Paris Conventions, and this funding was earmarked for. Or maybe designated to support practices like silvopasture, because silvopasture and agroforestry, because silvopasture, agroforestry, managed grazing, they are in the top 20 practices addressed in the Project Drawdown. Is a book led by Paul Hawken, which identified the practices that can draw more carbon from the atmosphere into biological systems and into the soil. And obviously, agroforestry is one of them, because it is is a more perennial system than row crops or annual agriculture.
Yeah, I just follow up, because I've heard of like projects through NRCS for like planting different tree species for wildlife populations and stuff, so I was curious if these are like NRCS funded programs, or I'm just wondering if, for reference to farmers out there that might be interested, who I would direct them to.
Yes, NRCS is behind some of the requests for proposals, and but there are other programs that also encourage planting trees. And for that reason, I think there are initiatives that are national that have been encouraging farmers to plant trees. And for that reason, we as a group identified the need for increasing the capacity of nurseries, because there will not be enough trees to cover all that demand.
And just to add on to what Juan said, a member of the agroforestry team presented a spreadsheet at one of our last meetings on the different funding sources that are available, because there are so many. And so we want to keep track of those types of opportunities so that we can make that information available. So we're working on gathering that information now. It's more easily accessible.
Yeah. And that would be, if you could share that with us at any point, that would be great. Always looking for more resources.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Kelly.
Other questions? Okay, well, it's probably a good time to take a short break. And then we have Annie Harlow still to hear from afterwards. So let's be right back at 2:25, so we redevelop time.